All right, so we are going to switch gears now, and we have our last session of the day with Maurer and Daniel Brickl from the National Museum of the United States Army. And the focus of the session is on soldier stories, a revolutionary exploration of self-determination. Oh.
It's making me laugh.
I'm going to do that one more time. So for the folks on Zoom that are just joining, this is going to be Liz Maurer and Daniel Brickl from the National Museum of the United States Army. I've practiced. And the focus of the session is going to be soldier stories, a revolutionary exploration of self-determination. Oh. Sorry, I need to edit this like that.
How are you all doing? We're going to start by introducing ourselves, and I'm going to let Daniel introduce himself first while I log into Canada.
So yeah, I'm Brickl. I'm with the National Museum of the United States Army. I've taught 20 years and I've jumped back and forth. Started out with a project when it was just a baby project, and they're trying to decide where they're going to build it and what they're going to do. And at that point, we were aiming towards having a very traditional type museum, and we had a little bit of leadership change, and people came in and they thought, let's really try to make this museum get into the 21st century basically. And part of that was because we have a separate fundraising arm, the Army Historical Foundation. So we're government, we can't raise money, but the Army Historical Foundation that we belong to could raise money. And they were struggling to raise money with the old Army, shoot 'em up, bang, bang, you know, that kind of stuff. So we had to introduce a lot of the new ideas in order to basically get this museum built. And a lot of that was attached to the Congress, also giving us money for road changes and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So in the end, the museum was able to be built around 2018. It was supposed to be built a few years earlier than that, but the Army goes through different cycles where they're like, they're on a strategic pause, everything stops, and then they get revved up again, and they get going. So we opened in 2020. I can never remember what COVID. 2021.
Yeah.
I think we opened for like 2 days in 2020.
It was, you know, for part of November.
Yeah. So our education program, we're really trying to transition into being more, you know, we had that didactic type learning, and, you know, we moved more into the authentic type learning, where it's more real world type situations, and we're experimenting with trying to go to that, the new type of learning, the transformation learning, where we really, really want to give ownership to the students and the visitors. And we're coming up with all different types of ideas. A lot of this is experimental. A lot of this is based on data, proven strategies. And the ultimate goal, the ultimate mission is to tell the story of the soldier. Our motto is, I have a story to tell. And if we can dive deep into those soldier stories, you know, I think a lot of people have really found them to be very, very effective. So with that said, I'm going to give it to my supervisor, Ms. Maurer, the chief.
My name is Liz. I'm the division chief for programs and education at the National Museum of the United States Army. If you find yourself in Fairfax County, Northern Virginia, please stop by. We would love to see you. We'd love to see all of you. We'd love to see those of you who are online. Bring your students, bring your friends. We are free, and we have free parking. So what more? What more do you want? Right? And we have a beautiful new facility. And everyone who comes tells us how much they appreciate how clean it is. No, we won't work. But that's like one of the most frequent comments. It's so clean. So we treasure that. I really appreciate being able to come here today, and I believe, having heard the last presentation, that we have a lot of ways that we're going to really dovetail. So If you were here for the last one, I think we're scaffolding on the project that you've already worked on. And like, as Daniel said, our museum looks at soldier stories. We do not tell the institutional history of the Army. Okay? We tell the story of soldiers, and that is deliberate, not just because it's more interesting, but because that's actually how the modern day Army views itself. Or as one of our colleagues says, the Air Force and the Navy are about equipment. Okay? The Army is about the people. So it's the people who do the mission, and the equipment is really secondary to that. And so as we're thinking about how we are going to be interpreting and talking about the semi-quincentennial, or the 250th anniversary, I should start by saying that for us, the 250th anniversary does not start in 1776. It starts in 1775. Why is that, Allison?
George Washington.
George Washington, right. He is made the commander-in-chief, and he walks from Philadelphia, rides his horse from Philadelphia, horse carriage, to Boston. So the Continental Army was constituted in June of 1775. And so that's why for us, the semi-quincentennial comes a year before all of the rest of you. And we're probably a year or 2 or 10 behind you, planning, because we've only been open for 2 years. So our objectives today are to talk about these stories of Revolutionary era individuals who made personal choices to take charge of their futures. These were really deliberate about how we wanted to build on the conference theme, which is about contested freedoms. We're going to look at primary source documents with transcriptions. We're going to use reproduction objects, reflect on these implications of individual collective stories, what they mean to us, and get new strategies for engaging students through multiple viewpoints in student-led learning. We're going to do that by showing you some biographies and then diving into a program that Daniel created that is available right now as an in-school program for anyone who is, let's say, within 20 miles of a geographic range of our museum. So Fairfax County, Prince William County, Montgomery County, Maryland, Prince George's County, Maryland, Arlington County, so on and so forth. Or again, you can come visit us, right? And we'll do it for you on site. Okay, so I'm going to go through some soldier stories, and I'm going to give you a link to a Google document or a Google folder, and you can download the primary sources that go behind these soldier stories. And I picked people out who represented different aspects of the Army. So the Army is a community, and especially in the Revolutionary era, we think about the community of the Army. So it's the soldiers, but the soldiers are continental soldiers. There's militia, there are the women of the Army, there are the volunteers with the Army, there are family members. I didn't do family members, but like Martha Washington is like a family member of the Army. Which is a little bit different than somebody who's following the Army because they have no home to stay at home in and wait for their soldier to come back. And the first one who I picked out for you is, and by the way, I've spent a lot of time looking at pension records, some of which are transcribed and some of which are not, and I only picked ones that were transcribed. So Daniel Morris, I picked him because he's an artificer. So he is a soldier, but he's not a soldier because his job is to make shoes and it's to make other military stores. And he has an interesting story because he ran away from home. He was indentured in Pennsylvania, and he ran away from home to join the Army, was captured by his master, imprisoned for about a week, sent back there, and then ran away again. So he takes charge of his life by deciding to leave this situation and go into that situation. And then his bounty was eventually paid back to his person who held his indenture. Second person, Sarah Osborne Benjamin. Not very many women in the pension application file who talk about their own experience. Quite a number of widows were applying for pensions. You know, there are 2 women who received military pensions because they served as soldiers, right, during the war that we know of. Probably there were more. But Sarah Osborne Benjamin, who's pretty famous in this kind of world of revolutionary women, has a really great pension application. And she really talks very much in depth about the experience of following her husband from camp to camp to camp. So not a lot of self-determination at the beginning of her journey, because she's being told this is where I have to go. But by the time she gets to the end, and the jerk has run off and left her to marry somebody else, this is when she's making some choices about how she's going to stay put with the two very young children who she gave birth to kind of during the course of the war, so with her babies and toddlers. And then as a camp follower, she actually received wages for doing laundries, doing some mending, and has a great story to tell about having actually met George Washington himself. Charles Conway is Revolutionary War militia. He is from Kent County, Maryland. And what I find kind of interesting about him is he's from this part of the world. It's super local. It's kind of backcountry. A lot of the people in that particular part of the world don't really think of themselves as being part of this larger entity of British North America. They think it's very localized. And he's really proud of himself for having stood up against the loyalists in his community. And they were outnumbered, by the way. So he's more of a political actor in this, didn't serve for very long, but very much from this very local perspective, which is oftentimes what the militia was called upon to do, is to protect the local area. Josiah Culbertson, Revolutionary War volunteer who serves both in the militia from South Carolina. I gotta keep looking for North Carolina. And then also takes a couple of tours of duty with the Continental Line. Never enrolled as a soldier, so you can't really hard time. You can't find him in the muster rolls because he didn't muster in and he didn't muster out. But he is someone who is really serving from more of a perspective of these revolutionary ideals. A lot of great stories about holding off the hordes, the one guy with the gun shooting through the knothole in the log cabin. Revolutionary War volunteer and allied leader Henrik, I can't pronounce, right? So he's Native American, and he is a member of the Stockbridge, Massachusetts tribe. This is an Anglicanized group who were pushed out of New York into Massachusetts and made the determination that it was better for them to ally with the Americans than with the British, because you see this break, different, especially the Iroquois, feeling pressure to go one way or the other. And the majority of the Iroquois went with the British because they saw that as being their best opportunity to maintain this ability to be in charge of their futures. Stockbridge tribe eventually get pushed into Indiana, and then from Indiana up to Wisconsin. Right? And there are some really great sources related to this particular group of people and this individual. Cato Green, you all probably heard about the Rhode Island regiments. So Cato Green is a Continental soldier, so he's not the militia. He's sort of a volunteer. He has a great pension application, was captured probably as a teenager in Guinea, brought to Rhode Island, the big slave trade in Rhode Island, is in Rhode Island up until the Revolutionary War. And after that initial fervor of the revolution is passed, we're like, I'm not feeling so patriotic now, but the states have different quotas that they need to fulfill for the Continental regiments. And so the state of Rhode Island makes the decision to open it up to enslaved men. And if anyone would be so interested in volunteering, then their enslavers would be paid for that, would be paid. What's interesting is that the people who were in the first Rhode Island did receive a wage. They were paid as soldiers. And the promise was that at the end of the war, so if you make, and this is for the duration, right? This is for the duration. At the end, if you're still with us, if you're still alive, then you will be free, you'll be manumitted. And that's exactly what happened to Cato Green. He lived to be 86, married twice. Outlived both of those. All right. And so those are different people to think about through this sort of lens of who are some of these individuals, what are some of their motivations, what are some of their stories. And then before I turn it over to Daniel, I want to go back to what Kevin, your teacher, said, right, in your video. That you talked about students making the content approachable and being able to pull things out. And the piece of information that he likes that he can follow that thread through. So what we have tried to do is to give you an ability to follow that thread. Okay. By taking these primary sources, taking these soldier stories, and try and reshare over here, my Google Drive. And I think what's real helpful is if we can talk about how the biographies can help you create new context. So you take any one of these sets of primary sources or any of these objects and give them to a student, and then ask them to go out and fill in the edges of this, right? So you can take Cato Green and say, what does it mean? Like, what was the Rhode Island Regiment? What were the documents? What did freedom mean? And what did the Congress say? And then just there's tons of secondary sources out there on the internet and in libraries and actual physical books, where you can ask these questions and look up the answers, if you will, and then put it into whatever kind of a project that you want to. So see if I can take you to our museum materials. There they are. Okay, so here is a set of Sarah Olson's primary source materials. Opens up, which is a picture of the object of the pension application, and then a transcript of the pension application. So you can pull, so you can see if you're going to hand this to students, then you can read it, annotate it, see the original handwriting on the microfilm, and then start to ask and answer different types of questions. So with that, I'm going to turn this activity now over to Daniel, who's going to take you through our in-school object-based program.
Yeah, so Clantis and Cope, they're professors in Illinois. They came up with this theory that anybody can find out what you're talking about at a museum by just pulling out their phone and taking a look at the internet. So we want to make it a little bit more creative for them and be able to create programs that students can have ownership of, that they can be creators of their own knowledge, right? So one of the programs that we came up with was use the jigsaw method. Teachers, any teachers in here? Most teachers are familiar with the jigsaw method. We're not quite there to student created material, but we're definitely getting a little bit closer away from that didactic, aggressive, constructivism type things that have been happening in the museum for years, and getting closer to making programs where students can be leaders. And part of that was we took a look at the Fairfax County School District Portrait of a Graduate. Anybody familiar with that? The Portrait of a Graduate?
For Fairfax County Schools, so
okay.
I know.
So there you go.
Yep.
So we talked to our partners and they're like, hey, we're really going to focus on collaboration. We're going to focus on critical thinking, or what you actually use a different term.
Creative
right?
and critical thinking.
Yeah, teamwork, diversity.
Being a global, ethical and global citizen, collaboration, communicator.
Yeah. So the other part of it, I used to have visual on it. So we're really focusing on that. And a lot of times people are like, hey, focus on the standards and go backwards with the standards. As a teacher, I could hit any standard just by developing a lesson plan. I know that's terrible to say. Don't ever tell anybody I just said that. But you can really hit that. But if you can hit the portrait of the graduate, and you can sell that to these schools that you're going to, it creates a trust between these types of schools. So as part of that, we're like, how can we make it easy on teachers? And one of the ways is we wanted to go into the classroom and just do it for them. So that all they would have to really focus in on is that classroom management element. So we do use the jigsaw. We developed the rucksack program, so we're still using our object-based artifacts, basically, and which a lot of teachers don't have access to. So we're gonna bring those into the classroom, and we're going to come up with this this rucksack program. It's worked with our piloted schools. We changed things a little bit up because you guys are like high speed, and just I want you to think back maybe 3-5 years ago when you were in middle school, and to think if this is something that you would have enjoyed doing. Okay, so we tried to count the numbers. I'm gonna do it again. This is the hardest part. I'm gonna count the numbers. Sorry for pointing it. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 23. So I think we have to go with groups of 4 and 4 in order to make this happen. I mean, we could go 5 and 5, but in order to make this really work, we're gonna go with groups of 4. So if somebody from this group could join this group. And somebody from this group. Well, you guys are 4, right? Oh, nice. Wow, there we go. And you guys are 3, you know, just like trust you guys, innovate, and take care of it.
Sarah's gonna be right back.
Okay, Sarah's gonna be right back. Okay, so here we go. I like to start out with a KWL. And I really, as part of the portrait of a graduate, one of those things is to develop leadership, right? You want to develop leadership. So instead of me being the sage on the stage trying to guide you guys and tell you guys what to do, I'm going to ask you guys to do the leadership part. So at your tables, pick one leader. And you only have 10 seconds to take that leader. All right, so leaders, come on up. I was a coach. I like to huddle. Let's get a huddle going, leaders. We're out of here. Where to go? And I apologize for my cards. It's terrible. I'm a terrible landscaper. This is
That is a really good idea.
and I'm gonna give you a resource. If the lamination doesn't pretend they're not big. You don't come in, we'll figure it out. Well, there you go. Yeah, wait. Now you can go back to
You. I know, I'm not seeing it.
All right. There you go. All right. Condition number 1, you got 5 minutes to complete it.
Okay.
Just the KW, but I shouldn't tell you that. Read the directions.
Work in your home for a complete K and W Okay, what do we know about the Revolutionary War? Low W. Yeah, so I guess like, what do they carry with them? I am.
The name of the object to describe the object. So what? Why do you think it's important?
Yeah. That's what we talked about.
So we did. I just remember that.
Yeah.
From a diary by another. The first one. The women and everything. Obviously, it's selecting their massage, dress, etc. And we have important to each other. Some with two others, 3 to 4 children. Not helpful in the fort. It is. No, the men's flow and scandalous examples every day. Show them believe that they achieve their parents' vices. The fairies who inhibit the internal regions can never be seen. Perhaps so hideous as these ones.
Sounds close to.
All right, go. Are you guys ready? Probably not, but we can move on to the next. Okay, so, leaders, now you're gonna come up and you're gonna grab a handout to give to everybody else. Leaders are gonna stay, and then the other people in your group are gonna go to another station to learn about the artifact. Okay, so come on up. Ready?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to.
So your mission is, each individual member will move to another group to learn about a different object.
Oh, you know what?
Spread out so that the team can cover most or all of it.
Okay, I might have.
Once you have arrived at a different object group, the object leader will teach you what you know about the object and invite your
Give me the extra.
or the information sheet on side E of your object sheet on sheet M.
The leader keeps the door.
All right, so we go to the site. All right.
And I like that one.
That's probably looks state. They volunteered. You know.
Good job.
So you were all.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Make sure you go to a different table.
Yeah, I'll go to the last one, I think.
Okay.
Which I think they are, I actually.
They're very.
Leader.
Oh, you're on.
So I guess, just describe that. Your job is to teach them about the object and by then their
So, yeah, so I guess let you take the third.
I do, I definitely plan. When I try to like teach this exact number, I think and I show my students and I say, yes, what are some observations you make? Okay. So we know. Split in it.
And we also put down to the services as
Would you call that?
Yeah.
This is.
Any guesses what I think?
What that might have represented.
I think I did mention.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was some-
And
Oh, yes.
Those things kind of. I don't think that's, they don't know, yeah, that's the thing. I don't even know what's happening. They definitely don't know. But that's really not. You got
Yeah, it's just.
I know it isn't.
My understanding is.
The program that I teach, we use one that's a little different, it's like, we call it a haversack or a housewife. Yeah, because it's gonna look different, it's a little bit more, it's a tip of the deer in your heart. Hollowed out. Yeah. So, then my students are talking, especially that, like, talking about the different software, whereas when I use a housewife, it's like, the men, like the men are carrying it, so that men are sewing. Whereas the camp policy. So, it is. That can't follow, and I certainly don't like carry. And everybody, it's not even that you want to profile. Yeah. You know, yeah, we never got. And so, background. Over 2,000 women follow the army.
Where sometimes they're.
You're not watching yourself, we're a necessary evil. Because you're writing. He's pretty clear. Followers of and tries to respond to neglecting. And sometimes they receive no recognition. Pensions based on the soldiers. By unarmed writing September 2017. And he said, women are the ugliest people to be collected. Their visage, dress, etc., every way reported to each other. Some with 203 and 4 children, and few with none. I do not help pick the poor and the creatures in their way of living and treatment with the many low and scandalous examples. Every day, showing them to make them imitate their parents' vices. The Furies who inhabit the infernal regions can never be seen, half so hideous as
No, very nice.
There's a lot where you working.
Oh, yeah.
And like sometimes there was
So now you're gonna go back.
This is different.
Well, 3 more minutes and then the final mission.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Revolutionary World. They all have to look to the side. Stick your hand up and stick your hand in the.
What are your other options?
That strikes me as like, you're like, if there's three.
Yeah.
Like.
Like, but you gotta. So without like, the amount of regular being
Right, it's like.
rectangle that has. You can hide the back and around your. And they're really.
It is also when I present this object. I'll show it to them. They will call the house, right?
All right.
Really just.
Oh, right, yeah.
I should just.
Your attention, please. I really am sorry, we don't have a lot of time. But the point is we're trying to expose you guys to this type of activity. And you can really talk about the individualism in the Revolutionary War. Because at that time, the different colonies thought that, you know, the other colonies were like a foreign country. It was almost like Europe is today. And it was a little bit scary for these soldiers to go and meet other people from different countries. And they didn't have the proper equipment at the time, as everybody knows. And it took a little while to do that. And George Washington and the Continental Congress came, you know, kind of locked horns a little bit on whether to make the army totally uniform or a little bit separate based on the colonies, and came some nice little agreements about that. So there is an individualism aspect to that, especially because we're America. We're all individualistic. We hardly conform to anything, except that we will, you know, do great things and innovate and that kind of stuff. So your next step, I have a mission card, but I could just tell you what to do because we're running out of time. Now you're going to take your expertise. Now you guys are all experts. You're going to go back to your group and you're going to wait for your object to come around. And once your object comes around, you're going to teach the rest of the group what you learned. Okay, so the original groups, head on back there.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
We have cards.
All right. So you don't need to pass out the photo cards. All you're gonna do is we're gonna rotate the items this way. What is that, counterclockwise?
Yeah.
Counterclockwise. You're gonna rotate it counterclockwise.
Thank you.
So now.
No.
Person you pick. Yeah, if you have somebody
So much.
missed it,
No,
because we have
more today.
Okay.
My students are saying, why do I have 3 kids?
The body color.
Yeah. Like, it's general.
Adams, what they asked, it's like, one of the questions that anyone is asking, the regiment have what marks, tables, no one really knows. Really? Let's get down. They're not talking at all. They're here.
But you can start.
Yeah. But it's interesting how like there's if you size it too small, it's kind of just adjusting how it sits on your head. Well, you notice the cockade.
Yeah.
Well, this one just strikes me as what we did really
Even the.
Yeah.
Contract.
Yeah, he has funded all those, so he said, you know why, and I was starting, I already done it.
No, right.
All right, a lot of conversations going on, but we have to keep moving. So every 2 minutes, go ahead and rotate your object.
Oh, no, you're fine. Thank you.
Okay, there. Definition of butt stack versus half stack. What's the difference? There is supposedly a difference.
I'm always saying cover stack more of like a picture bag sort of thing, but I don't know.
No, I mean, I think.
Yeah, but I think like it just.
I think the website is like, I'm thinking right now.
Yes, for instance, like they're.
You see, it's supposed to be used, not just
I know. Like, I was looking, I would get. And a and the haversack. It's horizontal, like a board, like a messenger bag, something. Over the shoulder. Across the body.
Most.
How much you want. Area like that, you know, that's heavy.
Because mine is just like a thin linen. I've had some that like have. Yeah.
They almost like sale. It's not much.
You were saying the ones that I've seen are in practice.
Yeah, I have one that's like a thin linen.
All right, another 20 seconds. We're ready to rotate.
Linen.
They go like the bracelet, you know.
I can't really say that I'm an expert. We actually just asked more questions about. And they're not left or right. Last. There's a slight difference. So they are left and right. These are 5 and they probably would not. We're very, very comfortable. You're not breaking these in. One question that we had talking about. Yeah. The average that's one of the things that we yeah, exactly. Yeah, theoretically. Yeah, it's kind of in there like the bubbles. Once the other part. And apparently, there are some
We have one more left. Rotation, right? But do you guys want to do this or should we cut it off? I know you guys want to get going. It's 4 o'clock.
The learner may wants to keep going, but the
4 o'clock.
knows that everybody's got to get down.
We're gonna get going. So one final point about this, Ms. Maurer really believes in collecting data, and I think you guys are talking about, you know, how we can collect data and how important it is. So the 5th step would be, to give them exit tickets to see how they evaluate the program. And of course, the exit tickets are based on the portrait of the graduate. And I think this really helps us because when we were talking to the Fairfax, it's really hard to get into the district sometimes. And when we were talking to the Fairfax County school district, we're like, hey, we want to partner, we want partner. And then we told them, we're doing the portrait of the graduate. Next thing you know, we got a call, we got a partnership. They came to our museum and things are really starting to happen. So knowing what your school district, knowing what your school's goals are very important. We try to visit as many schools as we can. We want to know what their collaboration is like. We want to know what their school vision is like, their 2 goals. Usually they have 2 accreditation goals. We want to be able to be part of that community. And I think this is important. And we're able to collect a lot of good information with this. And we can go on and on and on, but I thank you guys. You guys had great conversations. And yeah, thank you. That's about it for me. Ms. Maurer, anything?
So I think one of the things that I like about this is that we take information like we find in places like the Revolutionary City and then package it into something that can be used, that we use at least in with our visitors and with our teacher partners in our surrounding area. And so I encourage you to, to talk to us, come visit us, and to, think of ways as like, this is an application of the kinds of materials that we're learning about here. And any thoughts you have about making it even more accessible or relevant, we would love to hear them. And I have cards over there.
Yeah.
So,
And I would re-emphasize the portrait of a graduate. Many districts have them now.
Yeah.
Even some states are adopting them, and it's worth looking and seeing if they exist in your area because they are the future. They tend to be more competence driven rather than standards driven, which gives you more flexibility. And they really are it seems like they're the future of where education credentialing is.
It is the future, I mean, the standards are one thing, but like I said, people can check off the standards. But this is the portrait of the graduate is gonna take our student, ultimately, we want students to be prepared for life and for college. That's everybody's goal in, right? Is that we want young kids to be prepared for it. So it really is the 5 skills that will help them prepare for a global society in which the tech is here, right? They're gonna use tech, so that's the way we have to start to adjust, and we have to work with them. Thank you. All right.